Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of In the Pit with Lobo Tigre. My victim of the day, or the hour as may be, since we're here at the Sprott Natural Resources Symposium, very busy, is Morgan Poliquin, part of the Poliquin team, famous from Almaden, which has big exploration success. We'll talk about that. But he's also the CEO of Almadex, which is now the exploration branch, and Azucar Minerals, which has a large copper discovery. All of this in Mexico, or mostly in Mexico. I guess Almadex still has the U.S. properties.
Absolutely.
Right, so we'll talk about that. Many hats here, but most of my viewers and readers are familiar with the Almaden story, so let's start with that. Tell us about what Almaden's working on now, how's the Ixtaca project coming, and what could shareholders or prospective shareholders look forward to?
Great. Well, thank you very much for having me on. We are in kind of the end of a long journey, arguably from discovery in 2010. That was the first discovery hole. And we've moved through a number of studies. We, in January, filed...
Sorry, he's being modest. The first discovery was this guy, not quite jumping out of a moving helicopter, but landing the helicopter on a visible outcrop and literally making the discovery himself. It was you who spotted it, and you took samples, and you sited the drill. Am I making that up, or is that how I remember?
Well, that's right. With this general area is, we had a long exploration program that identified this area of Mexico, which is in the eastern part of Mexico, which is the western mountain range of Mexico, and the northwestern part of Mexico have huge historic deposits in copper and silver. And we had this little off-the-wall idea that the eastern part of Mexico was prospective potentially as well, and we had some good reasons for that. Caballo Blanco project that is we have a royalty in Almadex is led us to believe that was a good idea. We found, we came across that in the Pan American Highway, an outcrop with gold in it right in a highway, and so this is in Puebla State, and it's an alteration zone. That's in the literature, but we thought it was part of something really exciting. So that's right, we staked the claim. We took some initial samples and did an IEP line, some geophysics, and we spotted one hole to test an anomaly, and that hole hit, if I recall correctly, about 300 meters of 1.5 grams gold equivalent, and some really good high-grade zones in there. And that was 2010, and since that time, we've been doing various different technical studies, culminating in a feasibility study, which the report of which we filed just earlier this year in January. And on the basis,
that's a full bankable feasibility study.
That's right.
Been through PEA and pre-feas, and now we're fully bankable feasibility.
That's right. And so on that basis, we filed an EIS, an environmental impact assessment or statement on our on mining that project, and that's been submitted to the Mexican environmental authorities. And we've had a public meeting this year, which is part of that process that is managed by the environmental authorities in Mexico, and we're essentially awaiting resolution of that permit, which it would be expected later this year. Of course, they can take more time, and so the date isn't certain, but we're expecting by the end of this year that we'll have a resolution on that, which is a major, obviously, turning point for a project. So in the meantime, we've announced we've started project financing discussions, which is a normal thing to do, and appointed a specialist financial advisor who kind of puts together, introduces you, manages those relationships with very particular people who finance building a mine. And at the same time, we've appointed a very experienced mining engineer, because obviously we're prospectors. And
I was going to get to that, but since you bring it up, let's jump on that.
Sure.
You and your father, famous explorers. Almaden was a prospect generator. It's always been about exploration, and here you are on the verge of building a mine. So you're already staffing up, and will you hand over the reins?
Absolutely. I'm not, regardless of what title or role I will have, it's the human capacity to build a mine that matters. And we've found some very good people, and there'll be some more appointments shortly that have a demonstrable track record in building mines. The person we've announced has been involved in 12 mine builds or more than that, I think, around the world, most recently with First Quantum, and was involved with the Minefinders build at the latter stages of that when he came in to get it across the line. So we feel really confident in the human abilities that we're assembling to build a mine, and certainly getting back to prospecting is what would give me pleasure. We've spun out the companies which I know you want to ask me about, but just to jump into that, from my point of view, each one of them are doing different things, and it's very logical from a business point of view to have those things separated, because otherwise it's confusing. But we've don't have an enormous team that are managing those companies, because quite frankly the last few years have been very challenging, and we've had to keep a lot of balls in the air. So we think we're coming out of that, and as the Ixtaca in particular gets through the permitting stage, it will certainly be time for that to take on a whole new life as a mining company. And technically, I would very much hope, from my personal point of view, that I'll be far more involved with exploration.
Sure. I invite you to make a forward-looking statement here. Do you have any sense of the odds that you would, or Almaden would actually end up building that mine, as opposed to, once you de-risk it, if you get the permits and the feasibility studies there, it's credible. I mean, it would seem like if those numbers are real, and they're really attractive numbers, you should be taken over. Somebody's going to say, look at this, it's cheap, we should buy this mine. I mean, you're staffing up to build it if you must, but clearly a transaction is another possible endgame here.
Absolutely.
Have a sense on the odds there. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's not an easy answer because of the nature of the mid-tier mining sector in Canada, and the United States for that matter. I don't want to name names, but there are companies that are major producers, mid-tier producers, that are close to credit protection, it would appear. You've got a number of, I don't want to go through a name and a list, because but the mid-tier producers in Canada are, as a group, a disaster, with some notable exceptions. But I'll talk on a very positive note, perhaps, to contrast, the other ones is probably the best mid-tier producer in North America is arguably SSR Mining. As far as I read their balance sheet, they've got about 300 million net, and they've built that on buying from the Barrick Gold Corp perspective, which is the joint venture that owned that mine. From whom they bought that mine, was a very small operation for Gold Corp and Barrick, and you can imagine the inefficiencies in a joint venture between those two that Silver Standard, their very good technical team, I think, was able to realize and improve upon, and they bought arguably not a very large mine in Saskatchewan that they'd been able to go, as far as I understand it, from 600 to 1,000 tons a day. So through operational efficiencies, they've been able to increase production and profit from not large operations, but they're cash flowing, and they've bought cash flowing things. So right now the buzz is that companies that are in a position to buy things like Silver Standard, or I keep calling them at SSR Mining, are what might fall out of the Gold Corp Newmont joint venture. Cash flowing is what's needed in North America. So I don't see a lot. I think I call it a buyer's market without buyers, and I encourage people to look at the balance sheets of mid-tier producers. They're not good as a group. On the other hand, we just saw Atlantic Gold, just 2 years ahead of us, you might argue, who have been purchased for over $800 million US.
To your point, they built the mine first. Nobody bought them before they built it and proved that it worked.
And look at the valuation that they got from that, which was $800 million US. And that was, as far as North America was concerned, Santa Barbara, a $2 billion mid-tier that came out of Australia. So I think...
Where gold just hit an all-time high.
Exactly.
In Australian dollars.
So, I think that shareholders, the traditional storyline is that you find and perhaps develop a deposit, and it gets bought out by an established mining company. But we haven't been seeing that with development projects in North America. We've been seeing producers and cash flowing mines being bought. So I would hope that our shareholders would have optionality when we are permitted, but we're not waiting for anyone to create
Sure,
value.
that makes sense. And at the end of the day, that gives another way to win, because there's the pre-production sweet spot game right up to first pour. So if that's the path you have to go, then that's still a path of interest.
I believe so, and speaking about the particulars of Ixtacka, I think it's got great infrastructure. We're not building it in a very remote or challenging geographic area. Which,
I've been there.
And it's apart from all the things that make it straightforward from, there's no obvious impediments to development, and I could speak in detail about the particulars, but that's more of a permitting side of things. I think operationally we've got a capital cost of under $200 million to give us the first 6 years in the feasibility study are 200,000 ounces a year gold equivalent. And so that's a pretty special...
Do you have that mill on site? That you bought that used mill to bring the CapEx down? Is it on site, or is it still somewhere in Alaska?
It's still somewhere in Alaska. We've spent not an inconsiderable amount of money getting it ready to ship. To save, just to jump into that, the ocean freezes over in that part of Alaska, the Bering Sea Straits there, and so there's a window to move the mill to Mexico between June and say October, and so we wanted to make sure that there was no risk of it not being able to do it all in one season, so we got it all ready to ship. But to ship it to Mexico, you'd kind of want to do it in one move. You put it right on foundations where it's meant to go, as opposed to storing it somewhere. And it's really safe where it is in terms of weather. It's kind of cryogenically preserved up there. So I think, so the plan would be, next year we're ready to move it and put it on foundations.
Okay, so deliverables for Almaden before we go on to its sister companies over the, What are the deliverables over the next couple of quarters?
Yeah, I see resolution in our EIS, which is called EMEA in Mexico, and there are ancillary permits to get, but that's the main one. That really de-risks the project, I think, demonstrably for everyone. And then it's project financing, decision making, and a production decision. So, but the first step is the permitting. I think that's what people are waiting for and should be waiting for, and we're excited to deliver on finally.
All right, so by the end of the year?
We would expect significant news on it by the end of the year, yeah.
I was going to come to political risk later, but since we're on this, is there any signs, visible change that you see with AMLO bureaucrats? The new left-of-center politician in Mexico has a lot of investors concerned, and is he really going to give permits to gringos who want to mine their silver and gold? Have you noticed any changes amongst the bureaucrats that you have to deal with in the permitting process, or other changes on the ground?
We've seen far more engagement with this administration than past administrations. We think that this administration has publicly said, for example, that they want mining to meet international standards with respect to the environment and community relations and all matters that are important to society today. They want mining investment in their country. They see it as an integral part of the ability to provide wealth and opportunity to particularly marginalized parts of the country. So they see that, and that's what AMLO has said directly, as far as I interpret it. So we've seen a very engaged subsecretary of mining who is engaged with the mining community.
That's really interesting. The way when you put it that way, I've had this thought many times before. If you're left of center, if you're a socialist even, mining, it would seem like that's good industrial labor, right? The Soviet Union's symbol was a hammer and a sickle, not a computer keyboard or an abacus or something, right? You would think that mining would be a good, people's kind of work to be engaged in. So if you're going to be pro-people power and pro-laborer, well, the miners are laborers. So.
Absolutely. Mining is not a political activity. I've thought a lot about this particular subject, so I'm glad you raised it. I could wax on for some time, but I think, to put it really succinctly, mining is not a political activity. People who think that mining is, as they would describe it, a capitalist activity, that has never been proven to be the case. The Soviet Union felt that For example, local iron ore production was key to their steel industry, and they were very proud of it, in fact, and proud of their mining. Since prehistoric times, every kind of organization of society has mined, and mining, certainly the overarching political system can dictate the way capital is deployed and where it comes from. But the reality is, mining is as important to our society, arguably, as farming.
Civilization
because you can't have farming without mining first.
If you're not going to be in the Stone Age, you got to have metals.
And in fact, we measure human progress by the type of metal we use. We talk about Stone Age,
right.
We talk about different
Bronze
metal
Age,
ages.
Iron Age, right.
And so, yeah, it is not a political activity. And in fact, if you want to advance, the capital comes from all over the world. And if you think about it, even, not you, but if we all think about it even more deeply, the capital mostly comes from workers' pension funds that go into mining companies. So it's actually the workers helping the workers to develop mines through the vehicles of these companies. And I think that there's a difference between old left and new left, and I think you're quite right. Old left around the world.
Well, that's where I was going with that. Like, there's this perception that left is anti-mining, and if you're in the U.S., well, left is really green, right? And maybe in the first world that's true, but in the rest of the world, left could actually be very pro-mining, depending on the jurisdiction.
My understanding of Australia is that the unions that represent miners in Australia feel abandoned by the new left. They feel that mining is an integral part of the economy of Australia, and they feel that they would like absolutely, they feel that perhaps they would like a larger share of what comes out of mines, but they're not opposed to mining.
Right.
And I think that's the situation that if I read the administration, a new administration in Mexico, is that they're very concerned about the welfare of their citizens. They're very concerned about developing new resources for the rural and more marginalized populations. And they see that, quite rightly, that mining your natural resources in a socially and environmentally sustainable manner is the best way to generate new wealth for those rural areas, because otherwise people have to migrate to cities or to factory jobs that are not near their homes.
So I'm not ready to rush out and buy the contrarian AMLO play here, but that would be really something if it turns out that actually AMLO, at the final reel, that AMLO turns out to be good for mining in Mexico. Even foreigners mining, even though
I don't see why that. I see no reason to believe that good and proper and respectful development is. I see that the new administration, everything they're saying is, it suggests that they're for environmentally and socially high standard resource development projects.
Well, we'll have to see. I mean, what they're saying, we'll have to see.
Absolutely. But, obviously, for anyone who has an interest in Mexico, this administration is less than a year. They haven't had a full year yet. So we're there, and we've made this investment. So we're very, very hopeful that we really believe in what we're doing. We really believe that mining investment. It's a large amount of capital that goes into rural communities, and we think that extremely positive things can come out. And ultimately, 30% of them, 30 to 50% of the gross value of the metals are labor costs. So right off the bat, 30 to 50% of what of the costs are labor.
Yeah,
and then 30% is usually power, which is usually helps subsidize the local power in many cases. And there's all sorts of ancillary supplies, as you can imagine,
sure.
Steel and so ultimately the bulk of a mining development project in terms of 5% in return on invested capital seems to be what mining hopes to generate, or so that means that 95% of that invested capital stays in the country. So I think there's and the training, and mining is high-paying jobs.
Yes.
Compared to tourism.
Or agriculture. I've been to places where opposition to mining has been funded by the big farm cooperatives that are worried about the miners attracting the workers away with higher paying jobs.
That wouldn't surprise me. So I think the signals I've seen so far, I'm very optimistic. I really believe in investing in the rural communities that we're investing in, and we really look to build creative and positive long-term investments as part of our strategy to create value for our shareholders. We see those things being completely in concert, and I think that's what the new administration would like to see, because ultimately, there are lots of challenges for Canada and Mexico in our relationship, say, with the United States, and
for example,
so development of your natural resources has to be an important part of progress.
Okay, so we're waiting on the EIS and mine finance. These are not very expensive activities. Are we doing any exploration, or are you spending money
Not
anywhere
at the
else?
moment. We're pretty focused on.
And you have cash in the bank?
Yes, we do.
In Almaden specifically.
That's right.
So right now we're waiting for these milestones, and then we have a construction decision, and then we see what we see.
Yeah, we're really at the end of the development journey, and really now we're into in terms of creating the value here. Today what we see is taking that step further, and that's about the human capacity to do so. We do all kinds of things in our company, like diamond drilling. Diamond drilling is not a diamond drill; it's the humans to operate the diamond drill and the skills. So, we think that we can build the team that will create the value at Ixtaca, and we're not waiting for somebody else to do that. But certainly, I'm sure that our shareholders would love the optionality, if it were out there, to look at different ways of creating value. You're talking about M&A, or asked me that question, but I have to say that.
Well, there was another project also kept when the first fission happened, right? Almaden and Almadex. You spun all the exploration properties out except for one that was kept in the Almaden portfolio, as I recall. So it wasn't just Ixtaca Maxtitlan, but it was Ixtaca and this other thing. Are we doing anything with the other thing? Is it still there?
No. It was just Ixtaca.
Was it?
Yeah.
Am I misremembering it? I thought it was.
I think so, but maybe I am.
Okay.
So that's our sole focus in Almaden. We think there's lots of exploration to do. We think that there's potential to expand the resources there with drilling over time. We think that there's alteration zones, and there's good drill results, actually.
Okay, but it's not going to happen now. So we should probably, we have only so much time. We should move on to.
Sure.
Let's talk about, and I want to make sure I get them straight. Almadex is the prospect generator now with the rest of the exploration.
That's right.
And Azucar Minerals is the one with the El Cobre project. Talk to us about El Cobre. Signs of bigness there, some multi-100-meter intercepts of copper mineralization. Where is it at? What happens next?
Great, thanks for that. Well, just to give people, just in case they're new, we initially thought, okay, we're developing Ixtaca over here that's moving in this direction towards where we are now, and we should put our exploration projects in a new company, which was Almadex. And then we made another discovery, which was the El Cobre discovery. So at that point, Newcrest approached us and thought it would be quite interesting exploration play for them. So they invested in the property. They took a 20% interest in Azucar, is how it worked out. So they're equity shareholders, but not in Almadex. So Almadex.
Again the spin out.
Again the spin out. So just Azucar, what it's doing is. We think we've got 5-kilometer long trend of alteration, and that means the cooked up, baked up rock that is around a series of porphyry showings. And we believe geologically that we're at the level below which you would find a porphyry. We're at the top of the porphyry environment. We're not at the bottom, but we're not in the middle. So the porphyries, if they're there, might not all be exposed, might be beneath us, but not miles beneath us. So 3 were exposed, and those 3 we've done, one of them we've done quite a bit of drilling on, and we have potentially defined, are moving towards defining a near surface resource that's sort of starting to develop there, and we hope in the near future we can describe that in terms of a resource statement. The other couple of zones have some really spectacular hits, but to date we haven't really found where they're coming from and the roots of them. But we have many targets, and I don't mind saying that again, many targets that we have not yet drilled. And so I think Newcrest feels, if I may attempt to speak for them, and certainly Azucar feels that it's a big footprint, and we may not have found the really driving force of it. So we don't want to focus on any one of the zones too greatly. We want to make sure we explore that whole system, because Newcrest itself, they're free cash flowing $1 billion a year on the Cadia district, and it started off with a very small open pit, which is just, I think it was 300 million tons of 0.17 copper, 0.6 grams gold, and then they found a deep, quite small, but high grade 2 gram deposit of about 50 million tons. 20 years later, they've got 3 billion tons they're block caving in the same district. So all 3 of those things look different.
Newcrest took a stake. Are they JV partners, or is it 100%?
They're just equity, only in Azucar, and it's basically 20%.
Okay, and so you're spending your own money. Azucar is spending its own money. There's no JV partner.
There's no JV on it.
Okay. So what happens this year? What's the budget for this year?
Drilling. So we expect by the end of this year to have drilled the holes which are hopefully will vector. Hopefully one will hit a home run. We're always hopeful when we drill a hole will hit a home run. But what we're the plan is that these holes will vector us in at a minimum to what we hope will be the heart of this.
How much will that cost, and how much do you have in the bank?
Yeah, we've got at the last quarter we've got 12 million, and it costs us. The drills are owned by Almadex, which we can talk about, but Azucar has a very special deal on drilling, and so it is our view that it's costing. A little more than $100 a meter all in to do all the drilling with the assaying and that sort of a thing. So we are looking at about 10,000 meters of drilling right now. To the end of the year, what exactly we'll be at, but that's kind of it gives you an idea of our budget. I don't plan out 50,000 meters at a time because it's an exploration program.
Right. Okay, we're almost out of time. We got to go here, but I just want to say real quick, Almadex is still JV model. Do you have other people's money going in the ground?
We do. We just announced 2 new option joint venture deals earlier this summer on some properties here in British Columbia, and we have a joint venture that's active in Nevada, and we have a portfolio of properties in Mexico, Nevada, and British Columbia. That we plan, kind of the general plan is to drill 1 property a year. We did that in the first year of existence of property in Mexico, and we had some interesting results there from that drill program. We're hopeful. 20 properties, you can't do it all. So we think that more irons in the fire through joint ventures options are great, but at the same time we like to eliminate things or create value with the drill rig.
Okay. All right, well, we're kind of out of time, but thank you very much for the update, and good luck with it all.
Great, thank you. I appreciate the time.